As you all know, I am a huge fan of the Cormoran Strike books. I haven't talked about this. I don't think I've made a video talking about these books specifically. Like, I've mentioned them in passing when it comes to, things that J.K. Rowling is doing because, again, this is indeed written by J.K. Rowling under a pseudonym. And I have very strong feelings towards it. Well, not very strong. I am very, very. I found myself interested in this series from the beginning. I picked up the first one, as soon as J.K. Rowling was revealed and read it, and really, really enjoyed it. I found like the characters super likable. I found like the general mystery interesting enough to like keep you invested. It was like a pretty good. It was a reasonably good debut proper mystery novel, like distinct from Harry Potter, but still very clearly written by the same person. It's kind of interesting because you can still kind of like I really need to talk about this a bit more when I talk about the book itself and what I thought of it. But it's very, very apparent if you know what you're looking for that Joe wrote this. It's kind of laughable and it's kind of funny in its own way. Like I say laughable, I don't mean like laughable in a bad way. It's funny how I was able to spot some of these very typical Joe-isms in this book. So yeah, like again, I liked the first two. Like I liked the first two Cormoran Strike, but by the third, I was starting to get like a little bit burned out on them because I was increasingly becoming disinterested in the actual mysteries. Like the first two did a really good job of like setting up an interesting setup with like interesting characters with like a fairly well thought out mystery, that kept you guessing. Like again, I actually guessed what happened in the second and third one. Like the third one especially was kind of bad, like but kind of predictable. But for the most part, in spite of that, I enjoyed it because like I like the characters and I like the setting and just all the stuff they do. Like again, they're enjoyable reads. They're not the best mysteries ever at all. But like I still ended up like I am a fan of Joe's and I'm willing to put up with like quite a lot in regards to like situations like this. But having come to the fourth one, Lethal White, I'm really starting to wonder how long I'm going to feel that way because I really am starting to feel a little bit of Naruto syndrome here. And then like something I legitimately enjoy and will pick up on day one is like what am invested in, want to see more of. It's starting to feel very samey and like feel like it's not really going anywhere and that like it has really terrible pacing and just does not seem to want to evolve or really even be a mystery for that matter. It's kind of interesting, like going through this book, thinking about it, like not even in hindsight. Like I noticed this, as I was reading it, for like from the very first opening segment here, where like you're going through Robin's wedding. Should I explain who Robin is? I'll get to that. Well, you're going through Robin's wedding, and Strike is there, and they're having all these conversations and stuff like that. And you get this very, very distinct picture throughout these entire novels. The entire thing, rather than like building up the detective agency or doing like solving mysteries or like having an overall like plot when it comes like mystery related, like the overall plot of the Cormoran Strike novels seems to be leading up to when Cormoran and Robin will fuck. Like this entire series has been like building up to when like Robin is going to leave her now husband to be with her boss Strike instead. And it's kind of ridiculous how padded out it is in some regards because like they have been, you know, into each other from the very beginning, right? Like Robin has been engaged to this guy, you know, from the very beginning. And okay, so Robin is engaged to this guy named Matthew before the books begin, and she is working in London, preparing for their life together or whatever. In the first book, they don't really. In the first book, they don't really go into detail as to what their relationship is like, but Robin is very, 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 very clearly enamored with Strike and his lifestyle because growing up, she always wanted to be a detective. And when she comes to work for him through like the temp agency, the entire novel is like establishing like how they work together and what they what their relationship is like, and it's very, very interesting. And it has a really good character dynamic. And like a lot of people growing up reading Harry Potter thought that like Harry and Hermione should have been together instead of like Harry and Ginny and Ron and Hermione. Like a lot of people thought Harry and Hermione should fuck because like Hermione is like so clever and so useful and like complimented Harry better. Like I don't agree with that. Like I do like the official canon pairings, but I do understand why people feel that way. And I think the Cormoran Strike novels are kind of like. Are kind of built off that concept because Robin, is based like Hermione is basically a self-insert of J.K. Rowling herself, and has the same sort of like kind of personality. Oh well, she's not the exact same. She has her own like unique quirks and like is distinct, but like again, it's like the same kind of like character dynamics where you have like the hero, the protagonist, and this incredibly competent like under like a friend or relationship. Like again, the relationship is a bit different. Like Robin is younger, and of course they want to fuck each other, but like it's a little bit different. Okay, so it's not like a rehash, but like it's still familiar enough to like get for you to get like a kick out of if you're like familiar with like how this with Joe's work in the past. Like again, it's something that I realized almost immediately, and it's always kind of made me laugh because it's so it's just it's interesting, like it's a cute, interesting relationship like that develops throughout these novels where they continue to have like the relationship changes and evolves, and they're not really sure what exactly where it's going to go because of course Robin's going to get married. Okay, so that I'm talking a lot about this specifically, and there's a very, very good reason why I'm talking about the romance in this book, and why I'm talking about it for Lethal White in particular, in that like this romance seems to be the overarching plot of these books, to the point where a significant chunk of Lethal White is dedicated to Robin going through her terrible fucking marriage. It's just okay. Okay, so without really emphasizing the actual mystery, so the entire thing seems to be about Robin's relationship troubles. Now, I like Robin, I'm invested in the relationship, I'm interested in where things are going, but again, this is supposed to be a mystery novel. Like, where is the actual mystery? Like, the guy who dies in this does not die until halfway through, and it's just, like, again, I think it could have been an interesting plot, but we'll get to that in a minute. So, basically, the entire large chunk of this, the entire overarching plot of this novel, of the series at large, seems to be dedicated to Robin and her failing abysmal marriage. And when I say abysmal, like, well, what do you think? Do you think like a Hollywood falling out, like where they make up at the end? Do you think like a a celebrity fallout where like they fucking hate each other, like they divorce each other for like petty reasons and do all this shit, like try to ruin each other's life? Like, do you think something like that? Do you think something like out of like a romance movie? Do you think do you think of like a realistic approach? Like, do you think that like they just fell out of love with each other? No. Robin's relationship with her now current husband Matthew has to be one of the most hilariously terrible relationships I've ever seen in my life. Like, from the very first novel, it was pretty clear that Matthew did not approve of Robin's work as like a detective or a secretary, basically. Like, he thinks it's beneath her, and like he's one of those guys who's like super they come from wealthy backgrounds, and he's really big on like being a having a status symbols, and like being wealthy, and like showing off his wealth, and being like part of like British English high culture, not high culture, like the upper middle classdom, I suppose. Like, you have all those people, right? Matthew is one of those people. And so essentially throughout the first novel, he makes it clear, whenever he's mentioned, because he doesn't have that big of a role in the first novel. Like, he mentions offhand, he mentions that he's not happy with what Robin is doing and that he wants her to leave. Like, again, he cites like safety and things along those lines, like the low pay of the job and things like that. Like, really, really practical stuff, right? Like, but the way the narrative describes it makes it very, very clear that Matthew is so hilariously unsupportive of his fiance that it makes it abundantly clear that he does not care about what she wants at all. It's entirely about him. And this, to me, is just like, it's incredible how like every single time this guy shows up, how he constantly ones up himself with like the complete bullshit that he pulls, and just the bullshit that he does on a regular basis. Like, pretty much every time he like talks to Robin, he says like the most disgusting, despicable stuff to her, and like it's just ridiculous when it comes down to it. So how bad does it get? Like, I can't think of like what exactly he does in the second one. It's not the second one. Like, what I'm thinking of is what happens in the third one, specifically, where it becomes abundantly clear that Matthew is a completely irredeemable piece of shit. Like, again, it's brought up a bit here as well, but the third one has to be the most over the top bullshit I've ever seen in my life. So, I don't believe. Okay, so what happens? Again, I don't remember the exact context of it. Like, I don't remember when it happens. I want to say that the two of them are on their way to where they're going to be married. They're going to make like their preparations. They're going to do all this stuff. They're going on vacation. They're doing all this stuff. Like, okay, this is in the third book. Like, it's something along those lines. They're like alone together. They're spending time together, and they start arguing. I don't remember about what. It doesn't really matter, because like, again, Matthew argues about Robin for everything. Because like, again, he thinks that she's cheating on him. She isn't, but she really wants to. Okay, Robin did nothing wrong. Okay, I don't want to make Robin out to be like a bad person. Robin did nothing wrong. So they're basically fighting about like her job and what she's doing and their future together, and just everything that's going on. And they start talking about their past. And if you're not aware, if you've never read these books, like lots of people haven't read them. Like, I don't fault you if you haven't. Robin brings up the fact, that okay, so Robin in her university days was raped. Like, really generic backstory, but yeah, she was raped in her university, which forced her, gave her PTSD, and like forced her into like this had to drop out of university and do all this stuff, and like Matthew was embarrassed by it. Like, oh, it gets worse, right? So they start fighting about this, and Robin brings up that Matthew cheated on her during this period. So like okay, so Robin just got raped. She's going through all this shit. She's having all these crazy emotional problems. Like she had to drop out of school. Like she doesn't know what the fuck she's gonna do. She had to go back to like her parents' house or whatever. Like again, that is like the worst thing that could possibly happen to you when you're a young 20-year-old. Just holy fucking shit. So Robin is going through this terrible fucking time, and Matthew cheats on her. And she brings this up like as they're getting married. Like she took him back, so they're about to get married, and they're fighting. And Robin brings this up, about why he did that, and like they start fighting about it. And Matthew just goes like, "Well, it was a hard time for me too." What? What? So, like, to recap, this guy, this motherfucker, is fighting with his girlfriend about what he did to her after she got raped. And his justification for it is that it was hard for him to... Like, that's the sort of person we're dealing with here. And again, the entire novel is like this isn't like a one-off instant. Like the entire series has been building up to this. Like Matthew is not good for her. Matthew is a cocksucker. Like fuck Matthew, he's a piece of shit. So, the entire series has been building up to this. So, they get married at the end of the third book. Like Robin is seriously considering walking out. Like in the third book, by the third book, she's considered walking out on him, but she still goes through with it. And the fourth book elaborates on why. And again, this takes up a huge chunk of the fourth book when it comes to like why Robin decided to stay and what their marriage is like and how terrible it is and things along those lines. Again, all stuff we could have seen some coming, but again, it's kind of baffling. Like, in spite of all of its problems, like again, it's padded out to shit. Like it should not have taken 4 books to get to this point. Like it should not have like been so over the top. Like it's so strange, right? Like it keeps going from being completely ridiculous to being really relatable. Because Robin, in her wedding, like she's having this miserable fucking wedding, right? Like she's considering walking out on her husband for like another guy because like he's treating her like shit. Like he fucked her over, earlier in the day. Like they make this clear, like Lethal White. Like he deleted like an important phone call from like her boss regarding like the current state of like a very important case. Because he was just so jealous of so they end up fighting about it, and during their wedding, like she's completely fed up with his shit, but she justifies staying with him because like they paid a lot of money for the wedding and her parents would be disappointed. Like it's one of the interesting things about it's very much like the Dursleys in this situation. Like Matthew, to me, is like the Cormoran Strike equivalent of the Dursleys. And that like he's this very over the top, representation of like the problems with like these certain kinds of people. Like Dursleys are like spoiled middle class families, who hate outsiders and anybody who's different than them or whatever. Like Matthew is like this person who like desperately craves to be like, have this ideal lifestyle, live upper class, like have a ton of money, like do all this stuff like at the expense of like other people around him, essentially. Like even though he's like an arrogant piece of shit who like looks down on like everyone around, like that to me is like sort of what Matthew is like. And again, in this one, like it goes back and forth for me. Like sometimes I like laugh at how ridiculous it is, and other times like I find it to be really brutal, really heart-wrenching, because like it is relatable. This is stuff that happens. This is stuff that like it's ridiculous in its own way, but like at the end of the day, like this is something that would happen. And like again, there are like a couple too many coincidences for my taste. Like all these stupid misunderstandings, like all this overthinking of such like again, it goes a bit too far in my opinion, but like it still somewhat works, you know? And by the end, when like she fucking leaves him, finally you are happy that she finally did something that she should have done, like before the first book even started. Okay, like again, I like Robin. I like her relationship problems. I like what she's going through, but um, this is supposed to be a crime novel, and this entire plot arc is like eating up all the time we could be spent like establishing like how the agency is doing, you know, all these cases, you know, what Strike is doing with like the business and stuff like that, like what the current state of London is like. Like I felt that the actual mystery in Lethal White was extremely underwhelming to the point where I genuinely feel that this might be the worst book that J.K. Rowling has ever written. Now, it's still enjoyable. Like I still enjoyed it. Like I still found myself like, you know, wondering what was going to happen next. Like again, I was still invested in it. But it was sort of like, again, like that Naruto situation where I feel like I was invested because of what happened before and how much I enjoyed that. Like in this one, it fell way short of the mark. Like I felt like none of its ideas really hit as hard as like the first one or as the first or second. Like I felt that it was just, you know, I think it did have more interesting ideas than the third one. Like I don't remember a damn thing about the third one, honestly. Like I need to reread all these, honestly. Because I just do not remember the third one at all. Like I know it has a serial killer, but whatever. Like that one was like unremarkable to me. Like the fourth one, I feel had a lot of interesting idea. Like it like brings in like the 2012 London Olympics and like the political situations involving that, and it has like some people involved in that, and like you have like a socialist protesters. You have this rich family who's like on hard times. You have this like unexpected death. You have like all of this like this is stuff that could have led to an interesting novel, but unfortunately, it's so poorly fleshed out, and a lot of the characters are so underutilized. It's kind of hard to take it seriously. Like, for example, the entire thing initially revolves around Strike is initially brought on to this family, the rich family, in regards to this case of blackmail, where this guy, Jimmy, who is this like socialist protester activist person, you know, a Sanders supporter basically, going out and blackmailing a conservative politician in regards to money that he believes he's owed. Like he has some kind of dirt on him that would like, you know, really ruin his reputation or whatever. And the entire novel is building up to what that is, and like it's like the entire thing is like building up to that, like really getting you interested in what it is, and it turns out to not be anything. Like they even pointing out in the novel, like I don't think it's just because I'm not British. Like again, this is a very British thing. I think like it's the casual vacancy problem. I think is that like it's too steep in like British politics for like a North American viewer to appreciate. Like it's about hanging in particular because apparently this guy was selling gallows to like third world countries, and apparently that was not illegal at the time he was doing it, but it is now, and he's worried that like it'll. Like the thing about this though is that like this guy was like pro hanging anyway. Like the people who voted for him wouldn't be angry about like I don't understand what the big deal was. Like I still don't, and I'm not even really sure how it plays into the plot. Like it just like it feels kind of half baked in its way, where it doesn't really come together very well. Like this entire thing is like building up this this blackmail case around this politician and around like the socialists, and then like in the end the socialists don't really have shit to do with it. Oh, yeah. This entire thing, okay, this entire thing is kicked off with this mentally ill guy coming up the strike and like talking about this incident that he saw as a kid, where like he saw a child strangled. In the end, it doesn't mean anything. Like he didn't see shit. Like the first thing that I imagined would be the case turned out to be the truth. Like it was just that could have been interesting, you know? Like this guy was like schizophrenic. He has like all these problems. Like again, there might have been something there. Like if they had like followed up on that and like had Strike come up into this, you know, government conspiracy on his own, like that would have been interesting. That would have been like something to follow. But instead, like the whole mentally ill aspect, like that whole aspect, like doesn't really factor into anything. Like you can take that guy out of it, and you still have your novel. Like you still have like Chisel coming up to him, like the conservative politician. Like you have that guy coming up to him and still like talking, you know, getting him involved in the blackmail and getting him like involved with like the socialists and like doing all this stuff and still getting murdered. Like again, the murder. The murder does not happen until more than halfway through the novel. Like nothing happens for a while. Well, I don't want to say nothing happens because again, it keeps you invested. Like it makes you think like it's entirely going to be about the socialists, right? And all this, but in the end, Chisel, the politician, is murdered unexpectedly, and you know they start looking into that. Like the daughter hires them to like start researching that and to like and start looking into that. And again, it's just kind of it doesn't come together very well. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like I'm not really sure where I should start when it comes to what's wrong with this. I think, yeah. Okay, well, let's start with the guy who did it. So the guy who did it is the guy who. Again, I'm not really sure how I should explain this. So I don't think this really matters. The entire thing is supposed to be about this family, right? And their relationship. Like, this entire thing seems to be, like, going into the details, like, the specifics between, like, rich white conservatives versus, like, the extremist socialists. And, like, I don't know, man. Like, this is the really uncomfortable thing about it, is that, like, Joe seems to want... No. That's not fair. Like, again, where do I start with this? Okay, okay, let's back on track. Okay, the murder victim. Okay, so Chisel is murdered by people close to him, and it's kind of obvious, kind of, not really. Well, okay, like it. Obvious. Where do I start with this? Like, I don't understand how. I can't think of how best to describe what's wrong with this. Okay, so. So Robin, during her investigation of the blackmail material, gets involved with the Chisel. So she ends up working for them and gets to know a couple of members of the family, namely the daughter and the son of another former wife. Like this guy, I need to talk about this guy. So this guy is... the son of like some Italian gold digger, and is like some playboy type, rich upper class guy, really. And okay, so I really want to talk about this because this is hilarious to me. So Robin is of course being like Jo herself, like a self-insert of Jo herself is like super liberal. So she doesn't like vote for these people and doesn't really again like it's not really critical. It's not like super preachy or anything like that. Like, that's just like how she votes and stuff like that. Like they don't even like she doesn't even like outright say that. She just says that like shits on them for being like anti-immigration and stuff like that. Whatever. So she knows quite a bit about the Chisels and why she doesn't like them, and she brings up this guy and how terrible he is. Like he spent time in prison for because he was a drunk driver and killed some woman, and he eventually got out because his parents are wealthy shits. Okay, terrible shit, right? Again, Robin has every right to dislike him. Perfectly reasonable. There's nothing all that terrible about it. Like makes a lot of sense, whatever. So Robin, ends up working with this guy and ends up, wanting to fuck him. Like, it's not even, like, subtle. She's so obviously, like, into this guy in spite of being, like, obviously married. It's just hilarious to me how, like, she puts on all this talk about, like, how she hates this guy, like, how she thinks he's a piece of shit, and then, like, is like super super into him for that like short period of time while they're working together and stuff along those lines. Like it is hilarious. And I found it like really the most interesting thing about the novel actually in that like this guy that she had every reason to dislike, reasonably so, like who had all these problems, like she still found himself. This guy was still more likable than her fucking husband. Like this guy isn't telling her that she should get like isn't like getting in the way of like her living her life. Like again ridiculous. Okay, so this guy who I actually liked, who like I actually felt was like a sympathetic character with like an interesting background and like an interesting relationship with the rest of the family. Like this guy goes completely off the rails. Like as it turns out, uh, I I'm not even sure whether I should talk about it. Okay, so this guy is involved in the case in a way that does not make any sense. Like it goes against everything that we've seen up to this point. Like it seems like it's not. It seems like it comes out of nowhere and it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the plot, and it's just it just comes off as not a reasonable end point for this to end up. Like when everything is resolved, like when we learn who did it and like how these people were involved and how like everything ties together, like all of it does not make none of it really makes a whole lot of sense. Like they didn't foreshadow it very well. They didn't like they didn't. Yeah, I say they. She did not blend all these plot lines together. Like it just sort of comes out of nowhere. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It doesn't fit in with what we've been told in before. In fact, going by what we were told before, it seems like these characters would have nothing to do with each other. That they like hated each other, and it's just you can't just tell me that these characters hate each other and then it turns out that they were like fucking the whole time. Like there was no indication of that. It just it just falls way short of what I expect from like a mystery novel in this regard. Like none of the explanations for things didn't make a whole lot of sense. Like there were lots of leaps in logic I noticed like throughout the entire thing. Like they finding stuff and like stuff that isn't even related to the actual case. Like Like apparently there's like an incident where a horse was killed. Doesn't have anything to do with the plot. It just sort of happened, and it just again, it didn't do a whole lot to really, it wasn't even like a red herring, really. It just sort of like, it just sort of like, it was just needless. It was just like like it didn't make any sense, and it wasn't like even interesting. Like, I just, I don't know. Like this feels like more of like exactly what happened in like the third one to me, where like it just felt like the things that were going on didn't really matter in the long run. Like it feels like this series is more about Cormoran and Robin wanting to fuck than it is about them solving mysteries. And that is a shame. Like that is an absolute travesty because I want to see these characters solving mysteries. Like I don't care. Well, again, you can't focus on like the relationship above or revolving around these characters without like really having a thread to tie them together. Like you can't just make this like soap opera-ish like thing, detective story without like the actual detectives and without the actual like interesting mysteries and like without the actual thing to keep things going and like to keep it interesting. Like it just feels like the mystery aspect is just like a vehicle to like get these people together, and it just doesn't work. It was so much better in the first one where like Robin was doing all this stuff. Robin had like her own unique perspective on things. She was like, well, she still does that. Like, I'm not saying that Robin is like incompetent or anything. Like, again, the characters are great. Okay, the novel has this problem, right, where it has all of these really superfluous characters. You have like Cormoran and Robin who are like Harry Potter levels of great and creative, who have these great, dynamics and like, are about what you expect from the person who created Harry Potter. And then you have like all these superfluous characters who don't matter. You have like the socialists. You have people like the Chisels. You have like generic ass fucking people. Like no real creativity or charm in them at all. Like compared to like Lula Landry from the first one. The novelist in the second. Like I don't remember his name, unfortunately. Sorry. Or even like that guy. Like that guy to me, like one of the reasons I'm so pissed about the way this novel ended. Well, pissed is a bit of a strong word. Like I didn't hate it or anything, but no, maybe I did. I'm just not like bitching about it. The thing about that guy was the one thing that I found to be somewhat engaging about this family. Like it seemed like he had a unique relationship with everyone, and it seemed like he had a unique perspective to add. Like because like he is like disgraced. He's still part of the family, but he's not technically part of the family because like his mom is a whore and like things along those lines. So he's not like on all of like the important family business. So he has like all these interesting relationships with like his siblings and like his parents and stuff like that. Like that was interesting, and I thought that would have been like a great way to like cement this like character and make him like interesting. Like I knew he was going to be involved to some degree, but the way in which he was involved was kind of ridiculous and came out of nowhere and like did not satisfy me at all. Like I don't think it's just. She could have done so much more with the idea, like there's so much more you could have done here with like, this idea and these characters and just, um, the whole blackmail thing, which is kind of just forgotten, like, some people involved get arrested at the end, but it's not really that big of a deal, like it's not really that important. I don't really care about that. Like it wasn't as involved in the plot as it should have been. And I just end up, it's just disappointing. And I don't know, like compared to where Harry Potter was at this stage, Goblet of Fire is one of the all-time. Plenty of people will tell you that's their favorite one. Like Goblet of Fire is like fantastic and really set the tone for what the the future books would have. Uh, this one, in comparison, feels like the series is starting to lose steam and starting to not really be as good as it really should be. And I really wonder what the cause behind that is. Was Joe just overworked with like the screenplays and working on like A Cursed Child and stuff like that? Like this took a while to write. Like the last one came out like 2015, and this came out like last year. Like why did it take so long to write? Like I was waiting for it for a while. It just I don't know. Like I waited 3 years for this. Really? Well, I'm not like that angry about it. Like I am going to try the fifth book. We'll have to see where it goes from here and see how things evolve. Like I don't know. I'm gonna have to wait another 3 years. It just I don't know. Like is it going to get better? I don't know. I really don't think so. Like Joe's track record seems to be like indicate that like she's getting complacent and lazy with what she's been doing. Like I fully expect her to like live out her fantasies of being like a blonde, partner in like a detective agency with like, fucking the other like. I expect her to just continue with that. Okay, like again that might be enjoyable to some people. Like again, it might actually grow on me. I might finally start to resolve the fact that come to terms with the fact that these detective stories don't have a lot of detectiving in them, but whatever. Okay, so final thoughts. It's okay. Like it's not offensive or anything. Like I didn't hate it. Like I enjoyed my time with it, but at the same time, like it's getting me I'm getting kind of uppity about where things are going from here and about what we can expect from the future. I don't know just how well the next book is going to handle this. Like again, okay, so here it took 4 books for Robin to leave this guy, right? Well, she's not even divorced yet. They still have to go through the divorce proceedings, and they did fuck twice, so they can't get an annulment. It's just and the entire book is about them going through a divorce. Just damn. I was fixated so much on Robin. I did not talk about Strike and his relationship problems because Charlotte, his former ex-girlfriend, finally makes an appearance in this novel for the first time since they broke up before at the beginning of the first novel. We know what she's like. We know what her history is. We know what their relationship is like, and how long they've been together and stuff like that. But we've never actually seen them interact in the actual story. And this time we actually do, and it is fascinating. Charlotte, I praise that guy as being an interesting character. Charlotte is one of those interesting characters. Charlotte, I think, is going to be one of the most instrumental parts of what is going to make the next couple of books great. We're going to have to see how things evolve from here when it comes to her plot line and how things come along with that. But I fucking love Charlotte. She is a great character. Really interesting personality. Going through a lot of shit. Again, I want to see more from this character and see her make a comeback in future books. I am very anxious about seeing that. It's kind of interesting, how she's kind of a foil to Robin in that regard. She seems they're already sort of competing over Strike. They haven't spoken yet, but they've mentioned they think about each other a lot, and it's obvious that they're sort of cat fighting, getting ready for the cat fight, and it's just hilarious, really interesting seeing, really interested in seeing just where this goes from here, because that to me is what I'm looking forward to the most out of the next couple of books. Like Robin finally left Matthew. Finally, let's hope the divorce does not take more than like a couple of pages in the next one. Like I swear, if we had to like go through like a trial scene of like where Matthew has to like cry and talk about like his dead mom or whatever, like I will not like. I will make fun of that so hard. But okay, so again, I had fun with it. Like it's not a bad novel at all. Like if you liked the first one, stick with it. Like again, I am talking about what I think of it. Maybe they'll get better. Maybe they'll start like having better mysteries. Again, I think the main problem is like the lack of personality among characters. Like I think they need to like establish more of a regular cast because so far we haven't seen any of the characters in the previous novels make a comeback, and that's kind of disappointing in its own way. Because like I think the more reoccurring characters are the ones that like Joe is putting a lot more effort into like developing and like having plans for. Because like Charlotte is fine, Shanker is fine, like Cormoran and Robin are great. Like those characters are all like really creative and have like great backgrounds and like have great like roles in the plot and like I don't know the generic like NPCs like the witnesses like the people you would like meet on the street in like an Ace Attorney game, an interview, like they're boring. They're not like all that interesting. Like they're not they're not someone to remember essentially, and that to me is kind of a shame. Like that's to me is what the series needs to correct is that Joe needs to make the actual mystery in these novels more interesting. That's all she needs to do to make a great crime novel.